Put on the armor of God, that you may be able to resist on the evil day.
Hello and welcome to the Armor of God, where we help you outfit yourself for spiritual battle. The name of the program comes from the 6th chapter of St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, where he tells the faithful to put on what he calls the armor of God so they can be prepared to do spiritual battle. Paul frequently used military metaphors to highlight the reality that we are in combat, a fight for eternity, and a fight against the powers of Satan. The Catholic Church has held from its first day that it was divinely established by Jesus Christ, the second person of the Holy Trinity, and for the faithful, that salvation is guaranteed by staying in communion with the Church and remaining in a state of sanctifying grace. This places a twofold responsibility on us, to live the faith personally and to spread the faith, what we call evangelization. In order to live it and teach it, we have to know it. And that's the goal of this program, the Armor of God. Each week, we're going to examine in a basic manner different aspects of Catholic Church teaching. Today, we're going to be continuing our discussion on virtue. Last week, we began talking about the 4 cardinal virtues, or the 4 fundamental virtues. The 4 fundamental virtues are called cardinal virtues from the word cardo, a hinge in Latin, because all our moral actions turn on them as a door turns upon its hinges. They are fundamental virtues because the whole fabric of virtue rests upon them. They are the cornerstones of the edifice of Christian virtue. The 4 cardinal virtues are inseparable parts of each and every virtue. On them all the moral virtues rest. For instance, moderation in eating and drinking, or meekness, for example, spring from temperance. These 4 virtues may be said to be the parents of every other virtue. Temperance and fortitude support the will. Prudence fixes its gaze upon heaven. Temperance seeks what is eternal and employs temporal things only as a means of attaining what it seeks. Fortitude allows no obstacles to hinder it from attaining its goal. The philosophers of antiquity recognized the value of temperance and fortitude. They asserted that to renounce and to endure was the compendium of all worldly wisdom, for they considered that the practice of these 2 virtues would preserve a man from sin and conduct him to supreme felicity. All this we began to touch on last week. Now let's go more into depth. Again, the 4 cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Prudence is the capacity of the intellect to apprehend the good things of eternity and the means of attaining them. The truest prudence is that which can best distinguish what is divine from what is human. The prudent man always looks to his final end. Like a wise merchant who thinks continually of what profit he can make, the Christian's thoughts are fixed upon gaining riches for eternity. Just as a serpent looks out and exposes its body if only it can shield its head, so the Christian keeps the end of life always in view and scorns earthly things in order to preserve his true treasure. Our Lord bids us be as wise as serpents in Matthew's Gospel. How cleverly the saints contrived to carry out their undertakings and obtain the end they desired. St. Paul displayed this prudence when he made use of the inscription he saw at Athens, "To the unknown God," to afford him an opportunity of preaching the gospel. Prudence is a most important virtue, for the will is guided by the reason. If the understanding, the intellect, is not capable of judging between good and evil, the will deviates from the right way and transgresses the commandments. That giant among giants, St. Thomas Aquinas, says, "Prudence is the eye of the soul. Without the light of the eye, we cannot find our way, nor without prudence can we discern the path to heaven. Without the eye, we cannot make full use of our limbs, nor without prudence can we practice virtue correctly. Prudence is the rudder that directs the course of the vessel. Without it, we shall make a shipwreck of virtue." Prudence is the ability to see and hold before us what is often called the big picture. The contrary of prudence is worldly wisdom, or the wisdom of the flesh. The wisdom of this world consists in discerning what will bring a man a temporal advantage or sensual enjoyment. This wisdom is foolishness with God. St. Paul tells the Corinthians that. So prudence is the guide. It's the ability to see and understand the course that must be traveled. So justice and the other cardinal virtues become the means to follow the course. Justice is the steadfast inclination of the will towards that which is just. Justice makes us willing to walk in the narrow path of the commandments. The just man dreads the slightest deviation from it. St. Joseph, the foster father of our Lord, was termed a just man. The just man is upright. He gives to everyone his due. To God he gives worship, to the authorities obedience, to his subordinates he metes out rewards and punishments, to his equals he shows fraternal charity. But as both from within and without he encounters opposition and obstacles, he needs temperance and fortitude to sustain him and regulate his actions. Through temperance, man only makes use of temporal good things insofar as is necessary for the attainment of those which are eternal. For instance, a man does not eat or drink more than he needs to support life and preserve health and fulfill his duties. He does not strive with excessive eagerness after honors, pleasures, or other sensual enjoyments. He is like the eagle that has its eye fixed on the heights and only descends to the valley in search of food. Temperance does not, however, consist in refusing oneself what is necessary and thus unfitting ourselves for good works. Such temperance would lack prudence. And lastly, fortitude. Fortitude enables a man to make sacrifices willingly for the sake of attaining eternal riches. He who possesses the virtue of fortitude does not allow himself to be intimidated by ridicule, threats, or persecution. He is ready, even if he needs to be, to suffer death. On the other hand, he endures patiently all the afflictions that come upon him. In this, he resembles the diamond that no stone can break. Fortitude is more strikingly displayed in bearing great suffering than in undertaking great achievements, for suffering is more difficult than doing. An example of heroic fortitude is given us by the mother of the Maccabees with her 7 children, who, according to the second book of Maccabees, esteemed torments as nothing. Abraham is another splendid example, for Abraham, who was ready to offer up his son Isaac, and Pope Leo the Great, who fearlessly went out to meet Attila, the king of the Huns. No saint was ever a coward. The holy martyrs showed fortitude in its highest degree. There is, of course, a perversion of fortitude in the persistent sinner. It's called stubbornness and is evident when he refuses to give up his love of created things and pleasure despite chastisements from God to encourage him otherwise. Such a man pursues his own demise. Now we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, more on the virtues. Stay with us right after this.
The Eucharist is the source and summit of the Catholic faith. Learn more about all aspects of the Eucharist in this exciting and informative series of talks given by Michael Voris. The One True Faith, the Eucharistic Discourses, is a series of 13 talks about the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. Enhance your understanding and love for the most wonderful gift Jesus Christ left for us, his own flesh and blood. Purchase the full set of the Eucharistic Discourses on DVD for $149.99 plus shipping and handling, or buy the audio-only CD versions for only $39.95. Call 866-738-1207 to order, or visit theonetruefaith.tv to order online. Learn how you and your family can increase your knowledge and love for Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist. Call 866-738-1207 to order.
Certain individuals set about to destroy the theology of the Catholic Mass, which would ultimately destroy the Catholic Church. Groups fraudulently claiming to be Catholic tasked themselves with deceiving ignorant Catholics into voting for pro-abortion politicians. Global warming is a covert program that is actually accomplishing much more than the eugenics program could ever have hoped to accomplish. Hi, and welcome back to the Armor of God. We're talking about the virtues. All perfect virtues spring from the love of God and are inseparably united together by that same love. St. Paul says that in his first letter to the Corinthians. As all the different branches of a tree grow from the same root, so the various virtues spring from the love of God. All virtue is rooted and grounded in charity. We hear that in St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians. Charity may be called the queen of virtues because it incites the will to the performance of good deeds. As flowers of various hues are bound together to form a wreath, so the different virtues form a harmonious whole. Only they cannot be severed one from the other, and the bond that unites them so closely is charity. Therefore, he who is devoid of charity towards God does not possess a single perfect virtue, while he who has charity possesses them all, if not all in the same degree. The love of God may fitly be compared to sunshine. When winter, the sun withdraws its rays, the face of nature loses its beauty. So in the absence of charity, virtue loses its supernatural beauty. But it's quite possible to possess imperfect natural virtue without the love of God. For every man has by nature a certain inherent knowledge of what is good and a desire for what is good, by reason of which he can perform many a good action and by habit acquire ease in the performance of those actions. One may also possess imperfect moral virtues without the love of God. This was the case with the pagans of antiquity, and now we often meet with people who are naturally gentle and generous. That's just their personalities. It does not make them virtuous. Moreover, one may even possess imperfect theological virtues without the love of God. For faith can exist without hope, and both faith and hope without charity. For faith and hope can only be lost by falling into the sins opposed to them. Faith is lost through unbelief, hope by despair. He who possesses the love of God possesses all and every virtue, if not all in an equal degree. As soon as the sun shines upon earth, the flowers, the meadows, all things are once more decked in their former beauty. So when charity fills the soul, it will be adorned with all virtues, supernatural divine virtues worthy of an eternal recompense. All the saints possessed every single perfect virtue that there is, but they excelled in one more than the others. Job, for example, possessed patience in a high degree, David, the virtue of forgiveness, Abraham, obedience, St. Aloysius, remarkable for purity, St. Francis de Sales for meekness, St. Ignatius for zeal. He who is lacking in one single perfect virtue is devoid also of all the others, for he has not the love of God. And he who possesses but one single perfect virtue possesses all. One virtue alone is either no virtue at all or an imperfect one. For instance, a man who is given to anger possesses neither the virtue of meekness, nor of generosity, nor of humility, nor any other. It is only natural virtues that stand alone in a person. For instance, one may meet with an avaricious man who is gentle and meek. The greatest and noblest of all the virtues is charity. It alone unites man to God. It alone gives value to the other virtues, and it alone will last beyond the grave. The three theological virtues hold the highest place among the virtues because they have direct relation to God. Charity is the greatest of them, as St. Paul declares to the Corinthians. It takes precedence of all the rest, as fire does of the other elements and as gold does of the other metals. Charity unites man to God. Our Lord says, "He that loves me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him. We will come to him, and we will make our abode with him." Charity alone gives value to the other virtues. Again, St. John says, "He that abides in charity abides in God, and God in him." St. Paul declares that to speak with tongues, to possess all knowledge, to have the gift of prophecy and of miracles, to perform alms deeds and austerities, profits nothing, for all these are worthless unless inspired by charity. Charity lasts beyond the grave. St. Paul tells us, charity never fails. Faith, on the other hand, passes into the vision of God, hope into the enjoyment of God. The moral virtues do indeed remain in the life to come, but in another and more excellent manner, for eternal blessedness does not destroy the perfection human nature has attained. The virtues can always be increased. Virtue resembles an estate situated on the highest point of a mountain. He who's ascending the mountain is sometimes near, sometimes farther from the summit, and there are many travelers before and many travelers after him. For we each do not always possess the same degree of virtue, neither do all men possess it in equal measure. If anyone has attained so high a degree of virtue that his state approximates that of the blessed in heaven, even if in the very rare occasion to a certain extent he becomes like unto God, that virtue is termed heroic. Heroes among the ancients were men who had achieved more than ordinary mortals could accomplish, And for the beatification or canonization of any individual, it is necessary to prove that he practiced the 3 theological virtues and the 4 cardinal virtues in the fulfillment of his duties of his calling to a heroic degree. Heroic virtue is neither understood nor appreciated, but rather condemned by those who do not live a godly life. The 3 theological virtues are increased through the increase of sanctifying grace. That the increase of the 3 theological virtues is possible, we learn from the prayer of the Church at Mass. Almighty and everlasting God, give unto us an increase of faith, hope, and charity. If the atmosphere receives more light and heat from the sun, we see more clearly and experience more warmth. Likewise, when grace is augmented in the soul, the power of belief becomes stronger and we are stimulated to the exercise of charity. We also find that frequent acts of the 3 theological virtues serve to increase them, or if they do not immediately produce this effect, they dispose the soul to growth in the virtues. The moral virtues are increased by frequently performing good actions and also by the increase of sanctifying grace. Frequent acts will increase the facility or the habit of practice of good, while the increase of grace will render the will more disposed towards what is good. The more proficiency we attain and the greater the measure of sanctifying grace we receive, the greater will be our moral virtues. We should endeavor to increase at least in one virtue, for the increase of one will be accompanied by the increase of all the rest. We can and ought to cultivate more, especially that virtue for the exercise of which our circumstances afford most opportunity, or for which we have a particular admiration. The more we advance in our favorite virtue, the greater progress we make in every other virtue. Next week on the Armor of God, we'll discuss the opposite of virtues, sin and vice. Remember, lead a virtuous life. And until next time, God love you. I'm Michael Voris.